Welcome back to the Last of Us version of the Temple of Geek podcast. As usual, I'm Danielle and I'm here with Olivia to talk about the 6th episode of The Last of Us Season 2. And we're very excited because Olivia and I are actually in the same room right now. We're not sharing the same screen, but I'm looking at her right now. She's on the other side of my camera. Very, very exciting times. If this is your first time tuning in to Temple of Geek Podcast, welcome. All the usual things apply for the Last of Us version of this. The first section will be spoiler-free for events in the game that haven't happened in the show yet. And the second half will have spoilers, but we will very clearly talk about when that section will be. Yay! All right, so let's get started.
Yay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so this week's episode is titled The Price. And we start in 1983 with a much younger Joel protecting Tommy from their father, who we quickly learn is abusive, despite his proclamations of love and care for his sons. For the rest of the episode, we follow Joel in the role of father through a series of 4 of Ellie's birthdays. From birthday cake and handmade guitars to dinosaurs and space, Joel's love for Ellie is interspersed with his confusion on how to allow Ellie to be her own person and how to stop lying to her. When he breaks yet another promise to her, this time by killing a bitten Eugene when he told Ellie they could bring him back to Jackson to say goodbye to Gail, their relationship comes full circle and reaches the tragic point we saw at the beginning of the season. However, in a continuation of a scene from the end of the first episode, we see Ellie meet Joel in the middle, or at the very least on his porch, and force him to be more honest with her than he ever has been before. All right. Now, Olivia and I also watched this episode together for the first time.
Yeah.
On opposite ends of the couch, so I didn't see her face throughout all of it. But let's get started. Olivia, what did you think?
I loved this episode. I think it was probably the most similar to the game. And I know that's kind of a criticism that I've had is when they make changes. As a purist, I don't like when they make changes. But this felt so much like the game that it felt like I was actually playing it. And it was wonderful to see Pedro Pascal again as Joel. Probably the last time, which is very sad, very bittersweet. But yeah, I loved it. What about you?
Yeah, I really loved it. I was crying. There were times where I said, I feel like I'm going to be sick. I do think that, because I think we're always quite honest about whether or not scenes hit us as hard in the show as they do in the game. I do think that my favorite scene from the game, which is the space shuttle scene, I still prefer the game's version over the show, but I loved Bella and Pedro's take on it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really beautiful. I liked how we got the flashbacks as birthdays for Ellie. That isn't really something, the game approaches that differently. We only see Ellie's birthday once in the game. And I think it was really important to show this consistent time, but an inconsistency in their relationship. Each birthday, they are becoming more and more separated and more kind of just at odds with each other, and in a way that is different than just the usual like parent-child relationship. And I thought that was explored really, really well.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Those scenes were heartbreaking.
I know.
Yeah,
it was really hard to see. One thing though that I want to talk about, because it's not really a spoiler for the game to say that we're never sure when or if Joel fully realizes that Ellie is gay, until her kiss with Dina that he sees. In the game, in one of the flashbacks, in Ellie's journal, she talks about how she's unsure if Joel, like how to tell Joel.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to be honest with him, but she doesn't know how to be, and she's kind of afraid of what he might think. And so, but we're never really able to see when he officially like finds out. I think we're left to assume that he finds out when he sees her with Dina. And so I thought it was really interesting and good, I think, to put in Joel finding out when she's with Kat.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't really make sense in the game that like she would be with Kat so kind of openly and Joel would never know about it. And so the way that they show that was like a typical like teenage moment, but in the post-apocalypse. And what do you do when the world ended in 2003 and people, like gay marriage wasn't legal? Joel lived in Texas, of all places. And so I really liked that scene. What do you think?
Yeah, it definitely, whenever they have a chance to bring up the time period, the fact that it's different from the game and people maybe weren't as progressive, they always do so. And I thought that Joel's reaction, though hurtful, I was sad that he reacted in that way, was not necessarily abnormal for the time.
Yeah.
And I do think that, by the end of the episode, it is still very clear that, like, maybe that's not Joel's, cup of tea. Maybe he's not super comfortable with it, but he's open-minded enough because he loves Ellie, and his love for Ellie, it's more important than maybe his hesitations or confusion about, what's actually going on with his kid and how she's exploring her sexuality. So yeah, I thought it was really wonderful. I'm happy they included it because, like you said, they don't include that in the game, but it's such an important change for the show in terms of the time period and how people feel about gay marriage. So yeah, I was happy they included it.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how they showed Seth's kind of involvement with this, because we don't really see in the game Seth and Joel interact beyond Joel shoving him. And so I liked seeing Joel trading with him for Ellie's birthday cake, and then finding out that Seth was a cop, just like his own father was a cop, and how I think maybe Joel is not wanting to be like Seth.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want to be like his father. He wants to be better than his father was.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that moment, it adds more weight to the moment at the dance when Seth calls Ellie and Dina what he calls them. Yeah. And I think that was a moment for Joel of like, I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
I have, he hasn't been horrible to Ellie, but he's not been as accepting of her as maybe he could have been. And I think seeing someone who he associates with who his father was react that way kind of like flipped a switch in him and was like, no, I've been going about this all the wrong way.
Right.
And I loved that.
Yeah. Speaking of his father, Joel and Tommy's father, the addition of that, what did you think?
I liked it. Because I get what they were trying to do, like show. I mean, this whole part 2, season 2, is about the cycle of violence and or maybe not necessarily just the cycle of violence, but the cycle of life, kind of what we carry forward from how we were raised and what we've learned, and love, as The Last of Us likes to show us, is full of not just good things but bad things as well, and the things it makes us do, the things we learn from it. And so I liked that they started off the ending of that first part being, I hope you do better than me. Yeah. And I thought that was really powerful. And to see Joel throughout the rest of the episode trying to be better than his father and wanting to be better. And he was miles better than his own father was.
Absolutely.
I don't think he never made Ellie afraid. He made her feel safe and protected, which is the exact opposite of what he felt as a child. Yeah. And I liked kind of being reminded of that, because there are so many things that Joel does wrong when it comes to Ellie. Yeah. He lies to her. He, I think, maybe views her as sometimes not fully her own person. And that can be kind of easy to overshadow the great love that he does have for her, and the great place he has in her life as a protector and as someone who makes her feel safe in a world that very much is not safe. Yeah. And so I liked having that reminder of the good that he brings into her life too.
Yeah, because there is a lot of good. Yeah, there's a lot of good. I also really enjoyed seeing Tommy and Joel's relationship, and how, like, from the very beginning, Joel has always been a protector, and he's always protected his little brother. And, that dynamic carries into their adulthood. And obviously it just shows that Joel has always wanted to protect those that he loves, even if it is, sacrificing himself in some regard. And that is maybe harmful, maybe it's a little too much sometimes. But to his core, he's a protector, and he'll do anything to protect those that he loves, even to his detriment.
Yeah. I think he views that as his most important role.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which can be overwhelming for people sometimes. I think it was overwhelming for Tommy. As much as Tommy relied on it, there's a reason he's left Joel, so that he could be on his own and learn how to protect himself, and not have to live in the expectations that Joel has for him. Yeah. And I think we also see that with Ellie. It's overwhelming for someone to care about her as much as Joel cares about her, because no one else ever has.
Yeah.
And I've said this a lot with the game, is that or maybe back in season 1, I said that I think Joel loves Ellie not in the way she wants him to, but in the way that she needs him to. And I feel like this episode was kind of like a reminder of that. Of Ellie. It's not that Ellie doesn't know what she needs, but she's never had a parental figure in her life before Joel. And so she doesn't know what that kind of love looks like, and what that comes with. And to be introduced to that at 14 already, after you've lived 13 years of your life not having that, is overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. And she always goes, I feel she goes out of her way to remind him of that, of their interesting dynamic when they're talking about the house, when he's like, you know, this is my house, my rules. And she's like, it's not your house. They gave it to you. It's our house because they gave it to both of us. And then, you know, when they're out on patrol and she says, like, I'm your partner, you know, like I'm an equal to you. And their relationship has always been complicated in that way. And I think that, like you're saying, like Ellie doesn't really know how to view a parent-child relationship. And, you know, he's technically not her dad. And, you know, their relationship started in a really, you know, interesting and kind of strange way. And so there is this push and pull of like, yes, we're equals, but no, I'm still your dad and you're still my kid. So yeah, I liked how they kind of continued that from season 1 in these flashbacks.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting when you mentioned the house and how she said, you know, they give this to both of us, it's ours. She also says, you don't own it.
Yeah.
You don't own anything. And I feel like she was including herself in that.
Yeah, I agree.
I almost expected her to say, you don't own me.
Yeah.
And I think it was implied. I think they both knew that that's what she was getting at. You don't own this house. You don't own me. You can't make these decisions for me. Which just, again, just adds to the whole dynamic, like complicated dynamic, especially when it comes to everything to do with her immunity and everything with that. But going forward in the flashbacks we've got to talk about the museum scene. We touched on it briefly, but as I've said, that is my favorite scene in the game, or one of my favorites, probably top 3. What did you think of this?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I really did. You know, if you've played the game, you get to take a little bit more time in the museum, do more exploring, get to see all the little dinosaurs. She puts a little hat on the dinosaurs. And I really took my time playing that scene just because I really loved all of the conversations that we get to see between those two. So of course they can't do that in the show, you know, otherwise it's going to take the whole hour, which I would have loved. I would have loved that. So I think that they did a really good job of getting to the core of that scene. And that's, you know, Joel giving a gift to Ellie because he knows Ellie inside and out. And this is his way of showing that he loves her. You know, he has trouble. I feel that he has trouble expressing himself in those types of ways, but Joel really seeing Ellie for who she is and just loving it and loving her joy. I just think it's just like the most beautiful expression of love. And for them to capture that in only a couple of minutes in a very condensed version of that scene, I think was just so beautifully done. Just the way that he looks at her and the single tear coming down his face when they're in the little space shuttle ruined me.
I know. I did miss everything from the game. Yeah. But like you said, because they had to condense it and they had to like really pack a punch with a short amount of time, I think they did an excellent job with that. I especially loved when she was spinning the wheel on what is it called, with the planets? I forget what it's called. And she's like, oh my god, it works. Because after 20 odd years after the end of the world, it still works. And Joel was like, someone must have greased it. And I love that because he didn't just, you know, find this place. He didn't just, you know, like make it like safe for them to get there. He went in and thought of everything. He went in and knew that Ellie was going to want to try to do that. And so he made it possible for her. And he knew that she would want to get in that space shuttle. So he made it possible. And all of these things that anticipating everything that she would want because he knows her so well in that regard is such a beautiful thing. And there's something at the end and the little thing they do after the episode where Bella Ramsey talks about how it can be so meaningful, like extraordinarily meaningful for a child to know that their parental figure sees them.
Mm-hmm.
And God, I'm gonna start crying talking about it. But just like how special that must be for Ellie to have gone, most of her life up until that point, not really ever having anyone see her who is still alive. Riley saw her. The whole museum section reminds me so much, and always has, of Left Behind in part 1 and the episode Left Behind in season 1 with Riley, where Riley prepared this great, beautiful day for them at the mall. And she anticipated everything that Ellie was going to want to do. And so she had all of that ready, the arcade games. She figured out how to get them working, how to get the coins they needed for it.
Mm-hmm.
And she, like, with that was a more, like, obviously romantic tint to it. But it still was someone caring so much about Ellie that they see her.
Yeah.
And no one had done that for her before Riley, and no one did that after Riley except for Joel. And I love that expression of love and just anticipation of what they're going to want to do, and that, being on the receiving end of that is so special as well, of someone doing that for you, and you realizing, oh, you've thought about me as who I am as a person, not necessarily just who I am to you.
Yeah.
That was really beautiful.
Just so well done. Just absolutely so well done.
Yes. And then we have, in the rest of the flashbacks, after that is when their relationship starts to deteriorate. And I think that's really important because in the game there's a big scene in the museum where they see a former Firefly has been into the museum, and they've left these signs and everything, and it's a reminder of Ellie in the midst of this really beautiful, happy moment that she shouldn't be there. In her mind, she should not be there. She should be dead. She didn't know that she was going to die at that point, but her life was supposed to be worth more than this, and it wasn't. And at that point, she already suspects that Joel hasn't necessarily been telling her the truth. But so that is a bit of a change in the show, but I think it makes sense because that Joel really has no idea that Ellie suspects. Or he probably does, but he's burying it deep down. And so the moment for Ellie where she's reminded of the Fireflies in the show, I understand, needs to be a moment that's just hers. And so when they're walking back through the woods and she sees the Fireflies and she looks and Joel doesn't see them.
Yeah.
And so she, like, tells him nothing's wrong and keeps going. I thought that was a good nod to, this was a beautiful moment, but there's always that thing in the back of her mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of nods, just another small thing, because you know how I love when they nod to gameplay. When she has to throw the rock to break the glass to get something behind the glass. You have to do that quite a bit, especially like with vending machines and things like that. Anyway, sorry, that just reminded me. The little nod to the game just reminded me. I just love that.
Helmet. I love that moment. I love it. But as I was saying, going forward even further as their relationship starts to deteriorate after this, what did you think of Eugene?
I'm still a little unsure about Eugene's place in this.
Yeah.
So for people who haven't played the game, not much of a spoiler, but he's not in the game. He's referenced quite a bit. Her and her being Ellie and Dina talk about Eugene and when they're on patrol at the very beginning of the game. But we never see Eugene. And so I was always really curious, like, well, why are we going to see Eugene? What's the point of him? Is there going to be some big reveal? And there really wasn't much in terms of like who Eugene was. And so to include him, I was still a little unsure. I still haven't really formulated my thoughts on whether I think that change was really my favorite change. But what I did enjoy about Eugene was seeing the absolute devastation of someone who's recently infected and knowing that they're going to die.
Yeah.
And their very last wish is to see the person they love most so that, they can say goodbye.
Yeah.
And having him beg for that. You know, he's not begging for his life because he knows it's gone, and he just wants to see Gail, his wife, one more time.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed that because we see a lot of folks get infected, people get ripped apart, all these terrible things and horrific things, but there's something really horrific about a quiet death where you slowly lose your mind and you know you're going, and the very last thing you want to do is just say goodbye to the person you love most. So I did enjoy that. But what did you think about including him?
So I was I was in a similar vein to you, I think, because I originally thought that there was going to be some tie-in to his connection with the Fireflies.
Yeah.
Because Eugene was a former Firefly along with Tommy, at least in the game. And we do learn in the show that he was a former Firefly.
Mm-hmm.
At least he's his little tag. And so I thought there would be something involving that. Even if he was bitten, that he would say something to Joel. And so this whole time I was kind of like, is he gonna say anything about this? And that's gonna be the catalyst for it. And then that didn't pan out. So really, Eugene could have been any character.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of what is throwing me here, probably the same as you, as to why they chose to make him that when they could have had a new character or someone we didn't know. And really, like, as I'm thinking about it, of course, this is just like my fresh thoughts, especially coming from the episode and not having spent a lot of time thinking about it, is that they kind of wanted to not string along game players, but make us be like, oh, how are they going to use like exactly what we were doing this whole time? And so it's like, so I mean, it's manipulation
a little bit,
but it worked, I guess. And so, like, I guess maybe to keep game players watching if they're, you know, maybe veering off a little bit, I don't know. And so yeah, so I'm also unsure about that, because it doesn't really add much to his character. It changes a lot of what we knew about him in the game, so it is like it is quite different. But I mean, it's not a bad change by any means. I just don't know if it was necessary. Like they could have just had a different character, a new character for it, and so I'm just a little bit unsure of how I feel about that. But as you said, what they did do for him, showing that not paranoia, but the fear of it. And I liked what he said about how it's not his words he wants to give to Gail.
Yeah.
It's her words that he needs for him.
Yeah, he needs that comfort. Because
he's scared and he doesn't want to be alone, and he just wants to see her one more time. And that was really beautiful, and I think something that is very reflective of how Joel goes. Even though Joel's death isn't via infection, it's still, he wants to see Ellie one more time, and he does get to see her, but in the horrible way,
in the worst
way. And so I liked that aspect of it, because it allowed some very like meaningful dialogue, I think, to happen around that. But it also, I do appreciate what it gave Joel and Ellie, what it instigated, I think, between them, because this is the moment where Ellie has to accept that Joel lied to her, because she's seeing him lie to her right now. And like she said, it's the exact same face, it's the exact same thing. And so because she knows that Joel lied to her about Eugene, she has to accept that he lied to her about Salt Lake City and the Fireflies. And that moment where she tells Gail that Joel's lying is really a really powerful moment, or at least it was for me watching it. I don't know what you thought.
Hold on, I have to cough. Okay. Oh, I took a drink of water, and then it went down the wrong pipe, and I tried to make it better.
Sorry, Monica.
Boo! Oh my god, now my eyes are watering. Wait, what was your question you asked me? I'm sorry.
It was, what did you think of the scene where Ellie tells Gail that Joel lied?
Oh. Oh my goodness, my throat. My Monica, I'm really sorry. Okay, what did I think? I thought, okay. Oh my god. I think it made a lot of sense. Sorry.
I think it made a lot of sense for Ellie to call out Joel as a liar, because I feel like this is something that she's been holding on to, like, inside of her for a long time. Like, she knows that he lied, right? She has her suspicions. And I think this is finally her putting it out in the open, finally voicing this thought that's been haunting her for a really long time. And she finally has her concrete evidence that he did in fact lie. Not just about this, but also about what happened with the Fireflies. And so I kind of feel like it was maybe a little, like, you know, cathartic for her in a bit. And to see Gail's reaction, she's so clearly very upset that Joel lied and did this, I think also kind of makes Ellie feel like vindicated in a way of like, yes, like you see him for who he is too. And you know it's also terrible. And it kind of justifies her anger and frustration and betrayal that she feels because Joel lied to her. So yeah, I think it was a really powerful moment. And also just seeing Joel's face absolutely fall when when Ellie starts to tell Gail the truth. He's like, what are you doing? Why are you like betraying me in this way? She's like, well, because you lied to me. You know, and someone else shouldn't be lied to when it comes to a life and death situation, just like I had to go through.
Well, and I think it's also Joel's lie to Gail isn't just like, he could have very easily said, by the time we found him, he was already turning.
Yeah.
So I had to do it. He tries to take, and this is one thing I criticize Joel for this, because I think it's important to note the faults of our favorite characters, is that Joel, I truly think, doesn't ever want to think something is his fault.
Yeah, I agree.
And whenever he is telling people, we see this from the first episode of this season too, whenever he tells Joel, like, he tells Gail, I didn't do anything wrong. It's Ellie's the one she's the reason we're in this fight right now. It's not me. And so when he tells Gail about Eugene, he tells her that Eugene ended it himself.
Yeah.
And putting the weight on Eugene and therefore Gail too, because Gail has to carry that knowledge or supposed knowledge, instead of it being at Joel's hands and it being his responsibility and his fault. And I think that that's just a common thread we see with Joel, is that when he tells Ellie about Salt Lake City, about the Fireflies there, none of it is his fault.
Yeah.
It's Raiders who did it. And even though like he needed to lie in that moment to get her to continue going with him, he didn't have to lie that way.
Yeah.
But in his story, he didn't kill anybody. He just saved her. He saved her.
Yeah.
And in his story to Gail, he didn't kill Eugene. He is the messenger carrying this final beloved message back to Gail, and she even hugs him for it.
Yep.
It's like he wants to be the savior. He wants people to view him that way. He needs people to view him that way. And it gets him in trouble a lot of the times with the people that he cares most about.
Yeah, because it's never the truth.
Yeah.
You know, Joel is a very flawed human, very flawed character. And, you know, he just pretends to be something that he's not.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess that leads us to the porch scene.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk more about the specifics of that in the second half. Spoilers for the game. But I do want to talk about it here because it is a very beautiful scene. And it's very important to knowing where Ellie's head was at when she sees him die.
Yeah.
And I liked how they show us at the end of episode 1 that she walks away from him, that she passes the porch. She doesn't say anything to him. But then obviously this episode we learn, which a lot of us had suspected, that she turns around and she goes back and talks with him. And in this version, they talk about Salt Lake City here and on the porch. And they have that difficult conversation followed by a very emotional, ready to move forward. And I want to save our discussions about the differences between this and the game until the second part. But in terms of how this fit in with this episode, the way that everything was going with this episode, what did you think about it?
I thought it was great. I'm happy it was in the episode. I'm happy with how it happened, how it unfolded. I think the momentum of it was great. And I think it was beautifully acted. I thought just the two of them, what they brought to that scene, I think obviously differences with the game, but the emotional weight of it hit me the same way that it did in the game.
Yeah.
And that's because the two of them are just so talented. And when you put them in a room together, like there's just so much natural chemistry and care and trust. You can just see they trust each other when they're acting. I loved it. What did you think?
I did too.
Yeah.
I think it's always in those moments where I know how much Pedro and Bella care about each other as people, and that's when I can really see that kind of like shine through, is in these emotional moments between Joel and Ellie, because their chemistry is just so good. The way they care about each other like bleeds into how these characters care about each other. And I loved so much of the dialogue of some of which is like additions to what we hear in the game. So for example, like Ellie saying, then I should have died.
Yeah.
Then I should have died. And that to me is different than I was supposed to die there. It's her direct immediate reaction to him telling her that the cure would have killed her is, then I should have died.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very powerful change to that. But also Joel straight up telling Ellie something he never tells her in the game, which is that because I love you.
Yeah, I loved that. That was my favorite addition.
And I love that addition too, because I think it's so important for Ellie to hear that, to hear I loved you, because I don't know that she's ever heard anybody say that to her before.
Yeah.
I don't even think Riley said that to her. And so if we're going to have it like this in the game, where they have that conversation about Salt Lake City, immediately followed by the resolution, then it needed to be there. It needed to be, his reasoning for it needed to be straight and direct. I did this because I love you, and you may not understand what that love feels like or what it means, but this is what it means.
Yeah.
That I would do anything to protect you, and I would do anything, or at least this is what love means to Joel. Not saying that, the lengths he goes to is right, or is what all love should look like, but it's what it means to him.
Yeah.
And it's what he wants for Ellie. And I think it's very, very important for her to understand that then. Yeah.
And he's also, I feel like this is the first time he's being completely truthful with her, with what he did, why he did it, and so, if he's already bearing this one massive life, he's finally coming clean, it makes sense for him to just put it all out on the table, right? Because he believes he's going to lose her after he finally tells her the truth. So what else is there to hide? What else is there to keep secret, especially because Joel has a hard time expressing love in maybe ways that most people would understand, including the words "I love you." Again, like you said, it's the first time we hear him ever say "I love you." But this is finally him speaking his truth. Finally, taking down the facade, this protector, like kind of persona that he's taken on and that he believes that he is. And he is, he absolutely is a savior and a protector, but deep down, he's just a man who really loves his family, his daughter, Sarah, his daughter, Ellie, and his brother, Tommy.
Yeah. I just, all of the questions that Ellie asks him to be answered directly, were there raiders? No. Yeah. And every time he shakes his head, nods, and he's crying about it, just really, like, just that emotion was so important for that scene. And it really fit in with when he's talking to Gail in episode 1 about how he doesn't understand why Ellie's so upset with him. And she asks him to be honest with her. And I see, like, I want to watch these scenes back to back. The scene with Gail from episode 1 and then the porch scene, because I think like those happen almost right after each other, the same day.
Yeah.
And I want to see how those like work together, because I think it is a very natural progression from Joel starting to open up to Gail but immediately shutting down, and then Ellie asking the same thing of him later that day. And he is finally fully honest, because I think he couldn't be fully honest to Gail because she's not Ellie.
Right.
And I think maybe in his mind, if he was going to be honest about it with anybody, it was going to be Ellie, and it wasn't going to be anyone else.
Yeah, exactly.
And that adds some weight, I think, to Tommy not knowing, to him not telling Tommy in the show.
Yeah.
Whereas in the game, Tommy does know. is that it adds weight to the fact that it could only be to Ellie that he could be dishonest with.
Yeah.
And or maybe she's the only one who deserves it because it happened to her. He did this to her, not to anyone else.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to switch to our spoiler section. So if you haven't played the game and you don't want to know what is coming potentially in the next episode or season 3, then please leave right now and join us next week when we watch the season finale of season 2. We're not going to be in the same room this time.
On different continents, but that's okay.
Yeah. So it's going to be great. And thanks for joining us. All right. Spoiler section.
Yay.
Okay. So when it comes to changes, what did you think?
I was, as you witnessed, I was very nervous when all of a sudden the reason why Ellie and Joel had tension between them was not because of the conversation that happened at Salt Lake City, where he finally tells her, like, yeah, you were supposed to die. I saved you. I killed everyone. Been lying to you this entire time. And I was very nervous. I was like, oh my God, is this conversation not even going to happen? I mean, it has to happen, but maybe we won't see it until next season. So I'm still a little unsure about Eugene. Maybe they wanted to have Catherine O'Hara have more of a connection to the main storyline, and therefore that's why they decided to have her husband be Eugene, because we know that Gale isn't in the game, so maybe they just wanted to give her more, and it just made sense to kind of bake him into the story more in that way. But I still think that could have been done without Eugene being alive. I know that when we talked about the whole beginning part of the game not being the same, like that connection time between Dina and Ellie, and we're like, well, they can't do that if Eugene's whole thing is totally different. And so we're like, okay, well, I can understand that change if there's a better payoff with Eugene's character later on. And personally, I feel the payoff with Eugene just wasn't worth it. Like you said earlier, could have been any character. I also don't think that Gale needed to be Eugene's wife, and make all those changes with Dina and Jesse and all of that. Yeah. Again, it's that domino effect we keep talking about. And sometimes I think the domino effect is okay. It makes sense for the show. For this, I'm like, I don't know. I'm unsure. Yeah. But yeah, what did you think about the changes?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about them, but it's not necessarily that anything was worse.
Yeah.
I think it was just different. And I do think that people who've not played the game will very much enjoy this episode.
Yes.
And everything will fit seamlessly with them. And I don't because I said in the first section, and it's true, that the museum scene doesn't hit as hard for me in the show as it does in the game.
Yeah.
But I also kind of didn't expect it to. When I saw the first screen, the first photos they showed us a month ago, 2 months ago, of them outside of the space shuttle, I was immediately a little wary, because I was also I don't want to have too high expectations for it, because this is my favorite scene, but I also am I want it to be exactly like it, but then I don't, because I already know that no matter what they do, it's not going to feel the same way to me as it does in the game. And so I think that that's kind of led me to believe that I think maybe this episode, more than the others, has shown that they're really not trying to recreate that feeling.
Yeah.
They're trying to just introduce that feeling to new audiences. And so it's just different. I think that's how I'm kind of approaching it. I don't think it was worse, even if it wasn't as effective to me as the game was. I just think it's different. So yeah. So I don't really know if any of that really makes sense. But
no, it totally makes sense, because like you said, they're just trying to have the audience feel similarly to how the game to how, players of the game felt. And that's what they're after. They're not trying to make a completely faithful adaptation in terms of what we're seeing on screen, the words that are said, things like that. But they are trying to have the emotional response be the same, or very close to the same as when folks played the game. So I think it makes complete sense.
Yeah. We went back and forth. I don't know if we've talked about it on any of the previous podcast episodes before, but when we were thinking about how they were going to do the porch scene, and I had said that in my mind, it would make most sense to, you have to give the audience a little bit of hope. And so it would make most sense to me to them show Ellie turning around and walking back up the porch this season, and then save the full conversation for the end of season 3, because as we all know, or most people watching this, and Olivia and I know, that the full porch scene we don't get in the game until the very, very end.
Yeah.
And so you spend the entirety of the game, the 20 plus hours playing this game, thinking that her and Joel ended things badly. And that while there's hints that she wanted to improve that, you don't have any concrete evidence that he knew that. Yeah. And so you spend the entire time just completely devastated thinking that. And then the last moments of the game, you realize that no, he did know. And that's a little bit of a comfort, but also, pain adds to the tragedy of it all, is that, it's not necessarily that Joel died that's the tragedy. It's that they were finally approaching equal footing for the first time in their relationship, and complete honesty for the first time in their relationship, and then he dies. And that's the tragedy, is that they never got the chance to really know each other on that level. And so I don't know yet how that will change the ending of season 3, assuming that is going to be Abby's part and everything. I know that they didn't know for sure if they were going to get a season 3, so they needed to kind of wrap up this Ellie's storyline to this, and so I get that. But again, it's just that kind of wondering what the effect will be, what the domino effect of choosing to have the full conversation in season 2 will be to the end of the story of part 2.
Yeah, I'm actually really happy they decided to include it in this episode. Again, like you said, because they didn't know if they were going to get renewed for season 3. So, how awful would it have been if it was canceled and we never got to hear them reconcile? That would have been really tragic. But I think it just made most sense of where, if we're mapping out the scene, it was supposed to end there. And I think it would have felt incomplete and unsatisfying to audiences, even, in my opinion, game players who know what's supposed to happen, if they didn't hear them come to that reconciliation. And I actually I hope it has more of an emotional impact for the rest of Ellie's journey, especially because now I feel like the show, she's made a turning point, right? She's now this really angry, vengeful, rageful Ellie that we know from the game. And I'm sure we're going to see that continue. And now her reasoning makes a lot more sense. Right? Because we went into this probably thinking maybe they made up, but maybe not. We weren't really sure. But now we know that they made up, and Ellie wanted to try. And that was stolen from her, from Abby. And so her need for revenge feels more justified. And I think it actually puts the audience more on Ellie's side, if they weren't already completely on Ellie's side, which, is maybe a little dangerous for Abby. But I think it makes sense for this version. But like we keep saying, I obviously will always prefer the version in the game. I love the way it unfolds. I think you were right about just the emotional weight of it all. But it makes sense. I think it makes sense for what they're doing in the show, for them to finally reconcile right away. Or not right away, but for us to see it right away.
Yeah. In terms of how narrative plays out for the show versus the game, then it did need to be, because they have been very much in the habit of giving the reason before showing the outcome. And whereas in the game, they show you the outcome and then give you the reason for it. And so they're kind of flipping that on its head, which makes sense. That is how most shows narratives work. So it does make sense for that. And we didn't talk about this in the first part, but I love that Joel tells Ellie what his dad told him. I hope you do better. And it's an acknowledgement that, well, Joel's not abusive like his father was, and while I have mixed feelings about showing an abusive parent being giving their reasons to their children of why they're abusive, it is an acknowledgement that they know that what they did was wrong. And I think every child needs that and deserves to hear that at least once, that they're not, these feelings that they have aren't crazy, and that you know, their parental figure doesn't think that they're perfect, like that they themselves are perfect and everything. And it is in line with how Joel has been in the show.
Yeah.
Because in season 1, he apologizes to Ellie for her having to shoot and kill that person because he failed at his job.
Yeah.
And that's something that Joel in the game doesn't really do. And so it makes sense to have him say that to her. I hope that you do better. I hope that, like, I know that I've done wrong, and maybe when it's your turn, you will like have seen this and know that you can do better.
Yeah.
And I really liked that, like, passing down, because it is another way of him being like, you like they're family. They're family.
Yeah, absolutely. And for, obviously, we've played the game, and this is the spoiler section. So and it's sad when you hear him say that to her, because we know that she ends up leaving JJ and Dina to try and get her revenge against Abby again, you know? So she has the opportunity to do better, but she's just so consumed with her need for vengeance that she fails at that. And, you know, obviously she comes back and tries to redeem herself and redeem that relationship. But yeah, that when he said that out to her, I was like, ugh, that's like extra tragic, knowing that she's gonna follow in Joel's footsteps, like a step better, but still not completely healed from this like generational trauma.
Yeah.
So it's very sad.
Yeah. Did you have any, like, I feel like we've kind of talked about changes that we liked, but did you have any, like, specific, like, one from this episode that you liked?
This was very silly, but I enjoyed seeing that Seth could bake good cakes. I always just love little things like that. And then also just like the absolute incorrectness on the birthday cake. I thought was Eli 50th birthday. I just thought that was very funny. Yeah. No, I think that this episode did a really wonderful job of capturing the spirit of the game, you know, and spirit of those scenes, those sequences of the game. And I think it's helpful when the creators and the head writers of the game are also the head writers of this episode, as well as the director. Because it just, even though there were changes, to me, it still just felt so similar to what we experienced in the game. And, even though I think the changes, for the most part, make sense for the show, it's still, like, jarring to experience. So it was really nice to sit with an episode. It's like, yes, this feels like familiar territory. We're hitting all the emotional beats. This makes a lot of sense. And I hope other people also agree with that, and we're happy with this episode.
Yeah, I agree. I have to say, I liked that they gave us some of those flashbacks that don't have any, like, undertones of don't have much undertones of sadness to it, because as I said with the museum flashback, it's a great, happy, wonderful day, and then it ends on a sour note. And so you can't have like a full happy memory of the museum flashback, because you know it ends with Ellie seeing the firefly sign and thinking about how Joel lied to her and how she knows that he did, but she can't really do anything about it. And so it was nice to have the first birthday the flashback 2 months after they arrive in Jackson, and then the next one where there's tiny bits of it, but Ellie hasn't fully doubted him yet, or she has, but she's decided to move on, I think, at that moment, or move on as much as she can without having any evidence of what he did. And so I did like having that, because they hit us hard with the next, like, 2 flashbacks. So I was like, okay, because we do need to have that, like, undertone of sadness in the episode as a whole, but it is nice to have those memories where they were truly happy for all of it.
Yeah. And just the deterioration of their relationship just makes it more sad. Just makes it very sad.
I think this will be a good episode to rewatch just, like, on its own.
Yes, I agree.
And so I always appreciate having those where you don't feel like you have to do the full season rewatch. You can just do this one. And I liked the way it ended with showing us Ellie in Seattle. And we know that she's coming back from having done some horrible things to Nora. And now she has to face Dina and Jesse after abandoning them.
Yep. Yeah.
Too. So I'm interested to see how that picks up in the next episode.
Yeah, me too.
Yep. So real quick, any predictions for the finale?
I just can't believe it's the finale.
No.
I know we talk about this every episode, but I think our thoughts about season 3 being Abby's season are correct.
Yeah.
I'm sure, well, not sure, but I would not be surprised if we see her for a little bit of, next episode. Very curious to see where they end it.
Yeah.
Because, we see if you've watched the teaser, it looks like Ellie is, on a boat going out to the island where the Seraphites are.
Or to the aquarium.
Or to the aquarium. I mean, she's in a boat, so I don't know. I have no idea where they could. Oh well, yeah. Actually, maybe they are going to end it there in the aquarium scene.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just curious to see where they're going to end things.
Yeah. I don't know if we've said this on the podcast, but Olivia and I have talked about how I think that they are going to end with right before the fights between Abby and Ellie.
Mm-hmm.
And then as in the game where they show us Abby killing Jesse, we think that she killed Tommy, and then we go and experience her version of these events leading up to that.
Yeah.
That is the game's way of being like, you want to see what happens between Abby and Ellie? You're gonna have to play as Abby first, even though I know you don't want to. And so I could see them doing this similar thing in the show of being like, you want to see the outcome of this, you're gonna have to watch season 3, and that involves it being Abby's show for a little while.
Yeah. It's worth it though.
Yeah. And so I don't know, but they could end differently, because they did say that they tried to end this season in a way
where it's satisfying.
So I don't know.
I don't know either. Yeah, that's why it's like I really just don't. If they're operating with the thought that they're not going to get a season renewal, like they have to, wrap it up nicely. So it's like where does that even fit into this story?
Yeah,
it doesn't anywhere.
Yeah.
So I have absolutely no idea how they're going to end any of this.
Yeah. We're gonna find out.
Can't wait. I can't believe it's over. That's insane.
I know. Okay. Before we go away, it's just a reminder: if you want to see more of mine and Olivia's stuff, you can catch me on TikTok at Written in the Star Wars, on Twitter at DannyS394, and on Instagram at Written in the SW. I had to think about that for a little bit. Olivia?
You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Olivia Lupe Marie.
And if you want to see more Temple of Geek content, then you can hit us up on Blue Sky or TikTok by using the handle Temple of Geek. And if you want to check out some of our other episodes or shows, head over to templeofgeek.com. In the meantime, until we see you next week, just remember that if you're lost in the darkness, you just gotta look for the light.
Easier
Bye.
said than done.